computer. All right, we are back for another episode of the Collecting the Precious podcast. I am, as usual, Josh Long, aka LSR. I've got my handy sidekick, contributor, friend extraordinaire, Mad Eye Gamgee with me, and we managed to drag Daniel Falconer back. Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's lovely to talk to both of you again.
Good Monday.
So, first thing we'll do, we just talked about this kind of before we got started. Obviously, you said you were going part-time with Weta, and you've kind of talked about. Fans have gotten used to seeing you over the years. You've been such a face of, obviously, you and Richard both, but obviously you've been out there on the message boards and stuff a lot and doing and interacting in that way. And I know you're shifting, obviously, kind of into a different role with Weta. Do you mind telling us what exactly you're going to be shifting into?
So, I mean, I've been Weta Workshop is a fantastic place for me, and I will always be there. I'm not leaving or anything like that. Richard and everybody there's great friends. But one of the lovely things that they've always allowed me to do is be a little bit flexible with my time. So over the last couple of years, I've been part-time with them. And that's allowed me to take on other projects, including Rings of Power, including War of the Rohirrim, including other things as well. So that has been amazing for me, because it's a way for me to stay fresh and stay engaged and do stuff that I love, but not have to leave Weta Workshop to do it. So I've been managing my time somewhat that way for the last couple of years already. Mm-hmm. And my role at Weta Workshop when I'm there during the week has been art directing collectibles, specifically for the Middle Earth brands and for the Henson brands, because both of those are very near and dear to my heart. So in a sense, not much changes it has changed, except that I'm not directly art directing those anymore. Those are in other hands now. I'm still around. I'm still at Weta Workshop, but in terms of the collectible stuff, I play more of a supporting role now.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well,
no, I'm still here. I'll be there till they turn the lights out. I wouldn't want to leave. There's too many lovely people there.
Well, I know when the last time you joined us, you obviously said you had kind of shifted part-time, and then you had posted on the Flame of Undoing that this would be your last Q&A and that you were shifting. So I wanted to have you kind of explain to people that because you are important to the fandom and your voice and your passion and how outgoing you've been talking with us over the years, I wanted people to be able to know that just because you're shifting kind of how things are for you, that you're still going to be interacting with people, you're still going to still love it and all that kind of thing. So I wanted to do that, but you said a couple in there.
Nothing bad like that. It's all good. I think being less directly plugged into what's going on with our collectibles, being less in a creative driving seat on that, means it's harder for me to speak on behalf of the team in the way that I have in the past doing Q&As and stuff like that. So that's why I've sort of peeled back from that. Is my responsibility shifted somewhat. My focus is somewhere different. So I could get on there and answer questions, but I might just be BSing half the time because I don't know the answer, right? So it's more an acknowledgement of that. That's a little bit different now than it used to be. Okay. In the past, I could answer stuff with relative surety that I know something's happening. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, I don't know, and that's boring if I don't know is every second answer, right?
Well, so. I would like to welcome you to the rest of us who have been that way for a very long time and speculating on whatever. So. Don't worry, we have a secret handshake and there's some brownies and all that stuff. So we're all
as you shift your capacity away from the collectibles art direction, can you say just a little about what you're shifting toward or where you might be deploying that capacity?
Probably not.
Okay. Fair enough.
No, there's no cloak and dagger stuff. It's simply a shift in focus. So I'm not exactly sure all the new opportunities the new year will bring, but there are some things and probably some things. As always in this industry, there's stuff that I can't talk about too early because it's still a work in progress and all that kind of stuff. But
no worries. Well, we like the intrigue and we like following it.
Yeah, sorry to be so cryptic. I feel like some wizard, like only revealing half of my, of what's going on.
That gives us something to talk about down the road. So it's always good. I mean, you leave people.
I've got business away south. right?
Well,
Isn't
yeah,
that the way, that's what Gandalf says.
That's it. Right, right.
you did mention two things in what you said just a minute ago that if we can touch on it all. One, you said you did some stuff with Rings of Power, and I know
Yep.
obviously, that's going to be you can. I mean, just tell us what you can tell us. I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
Of course.
And then also, if you can tell us of what you've worked on with the Harem, and obviously that's going to be for those who don't know, it's going to be an animated film. So can you talk to us about what you can talk about within your role on both of those films and shows?
So I don't so with Rings of Power, I actually don't know what I'm allowed to say and not say. So I'll err on the side of caution with regard to that, just because fair enough, Amazon, it's their show, and so they want to control the messaging on it.
Right.
I think I'm pretty safe in just saying that I worked in two capacities on it. I was part of the Weta workshop team working on it very, very early on. And basically, we did some early preliminary design work. We did a little bit of world building work, which was really great fun. And then I worked directly, independent from Weta Workshop. I worked directly for the costume department, just as an illustrator for Kate Hawley, for the costume designer. So in that capacity, I was not necessarily designing. I was a conduit for Kate's designs. And obviously, anytime it's anything to do with Middle Earth, I'm dipping back into my history and drawing on my passion for the subject, my having been there during the trilogy, all that kind of stuff. So there was a little bit of that as well. But so yeah, very much a supporting role to others on those projects. But yeah, I was just honored and happy to have been able to be a part of it and contribute at some level.
Can you talk about what you did on War of the Harem at all, or is that still too far out for?
I think again, I haven't cleared anything with Warner Bros, but I've done some advising and consulting on that one, design capacity, and a little bit of designing as well. And they've been the absolute loveliest people to work with. I have to say, it's been a complete pleasure. I'm very excited about the project. Can't wait for you guys to see it. It's going to be really interesting, a new expression of Middle Earth, right? Because this is something that lives in the same universe with the other projects, with the trilogies, Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. But then obviously it's an animated expression, so it'll be something it'll be fresh but familiar at the same time, I think. So yeah,
there's a lot of enthusiasm. We did some focused conversation at last year or earlier this year's Dragon Con. And even though the film is a year and a half or so away, I guess, there's still a lot of energy building up about it. It's a unique project in contrast to the Rings of Power, because it's focused on a culture and it's for a particular pretty brief period of time, as opposed to this massive multicultural, thousands of years kind of second age thing. So yeah, it seems like the design opportunities would be different, so unique enough to be really interesting for you. But I know you can talk about it. But
aren't we lucky that we're so spoiled at the moment with all this amazing media coming out, right? I mean, to have a TV show, to have this new movie, when a couple of years ago, I think we probably all thought we're done, right? So yeah. It's really exciting.
It's nice after the Hobbit films were done. I remember looking at my dad, because he went with me to see the last one in the theater, the last time that I went to go see it, and before it was time and the theater was done. And I just kind of remember talking to him on the way out of the theater. I'm like, I think it won't be the last time I ever go to a movie, because him and I go see like Marvel movies and stuff like that, obviously. But I looked at him and said, I'm like, this will be the last time I think I see a Middle Earth film in the theater, because you never know if they're gonna re-release the trilogy and put it out there. I mean, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It doesn't work out schedule wise. So yeah, when they're like, hey, Rings of Power, and we've talked before, I think last time in the chat, and I've talked before with other people, kind of I wasn't sure about the show, but after Comic-Con, I really kind of started to feel really good about it, see more, hear more, it felt better about it. Obviously, the War of the Harem being an animated movie is different, but I'm game to go see it and go experience Middle Earth in the theater. So yeah, it's really kind of nice, to be doing, this all these years later as a fan. I can't imagine what it's like to actually be able to, continue to work on this in some capacity, like you've gotten to do going back to the original trilogy, in 1998, 1999, all the way to now. I mean, that's
I'm pinching myself, man. I feel incredible gratitude and how fortunate I've been to be part of this for so long and to stay involved in different capacities as it evolves, as this franchise is carried on. Because there's very little that I love more than spending time in Middle Earth. So it's
I understand that. Yeah.
So Daniel, what are the differences in working in a live action setting versus an animated setting? And what are the similarities coming from your skill set?
Well, that's been one of the interesting journeys for me is understanding what the differences are, and I'm still learning that. Something that's easy to make and to film, because you make it and then you film it, is very different when you've got to make it and then you've got to design it and then draw it hundreds of times, right? So there's all that kind of stuff has been a fascinating a challenge to learn. Oh gosh, innumerable differences, but oh man, I wish I could say more. I'd love to go into specifics, but I can't. We have to pick up this conversation in 18 months after the movie's out. But it's just it's been really interesting being part in the Middle Earth that is familiar and fresh at the same time. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's interesting about this, we're talking to the journey of having been here with this project, with this world for like 26 years or something now, or whatever it is. For those of us as fans who've been on this and been following these movies and following this property for so long, it's been fun to be on that journey. But then also every time there's a new thing that comes out, it's a new entry point for new people as well. So the shape of the fandom also grows and changes. And I think this being animated really changes things quite dramatically, right? That'll bring a whole different group of people in that it might not otherwise have ever looked at it. And likewise, Rings of Power being a TV show, is very, very different to a movie. So it's the change is fun. It's always different, and sometimes it's contentious, but it's I think you have to look at it as things grow, they evolve, right? And that's,
have you guys at Weta thought about, and I'm sure you probably have, with War of the Rohirrim being an animated film, and I'm thinking along the lines of collectibles, obviously outside of the mini epics and stuff, which have the animated look to them. Gentle Giant 100 years ago did some animated stuff.
They were really cool.
Have you guys thought about, if you guys make collectibles, are they going to look animated, or are you going to take them, or maybe because you obviously, again, going into what we talked about at the beginning, do you think it might be more, yes, the movie's going to be animated, but the collectibles may look more set in a real world setting, like like the Aragorn Classic Series piece that I just got this week? How do you anticipate that going, just from your own thought process? I mean, obviously there may or may not been talked about.
I'm going to be a total jerk and throw that straight back at you and say, you guys as the collectors, what would you want? Because that's ultimately what it should be, right?
I would want them to be real world. I'll be honest. I mean, just because that's what the rest of my collection looks like. I had those Gentle Giant pieces, and I thought they were really nice, but they're not in my collection anymore, just because it's more focused on what I saw on screen. And yes, while what I see on screen in this instance, obviously, yeah. I mean,
I have my Bakshi Sam Gamgee.
Yes, look at that.
Collected for a long time.
And I have a bunch of the mini epics, and I will keep those because I love those. But I think in this instance, the fact that these are going to be based on a movie that that like in that way, and I know the mini epics are too, but for people watching, I get that. But it's a situation where I think it needs to, if they're done in a mini, as mini epics, fine. They need to be animated, obviously, to match that style. If you're doing a 6-scale statue or bigger master collection, whatever, to me, they need to be done more real world-ish, how they would, if it was an actual thing. So, I mean, just for my, invaluable 2 cents of opinion, that's what I would do with it.
The animated automatically obviously becomes a source for print materials, 2D, and so it doesn't have to just be a 3D environment.
Right.
That would be interesting, but you'd think that the animators would be exploring the environments in a way that is adaptive to everything an animation can do. It's kind of like, well, what would a whatever that Spider-Man multi-universe thing that was animated. Yeah, I mean, it's less conducive to a 3D object, perhaps, but very.
Right. And and that's just one of those things I kind of thought about since the announcement. It's not that it's one of those, I hate to be kind of pegged as, oh, I just know, all I think about is like the collectible aspect, because obviously I've read the books many times and I've watched the movies many times, and
this is a collectible show.
But that is kind of my wheelhouse of what I do as staff. So I think about, it's like, oh, that would be cool. I mean, when I'm watching Rings of Power, I was doing a lot of that. I was like,
that would be a cool collectible.
Oh yeah, every
I'm going
background. Oh yeah,
please, because I mean, it was just so beautiful. So when War of the Rohirrim is now, so I'm thinking, yes, I'm going to go see it probably a few times, but I'm thinking, okay, I want collectibles, but I also know what my collection looks like, so it needs to match that. Whereas, like I said, if it's a mini epic, cool, I don't mind it being animated because that's what they are. But if you're doing statues, I think it needs to be real world. And I think I otherwise I'm not sure. I don't know how fans in general would take that. That's an interesting. That might be worth a poll for somebody to do or whatever, when the time comes, because I think that's to me, it's not that because I came up with the question, but I think it's an interesting question.
I agree. And look, I'm a huge Star Wars fan as well, right? And I collect the action figures. I collect a ridiculous number of them. It's the point of contention between my wife and I sometimes. But like, I love the Clone Wars animated show.
Right.
A fantastic show. And so I buy the animated style Clone Wars action figures.
Sure.
But I also buy the realistic interpretations, because they also, Hasbro, the company that does the toys, also does realistic versions of those characters. And I love them both, because the realistic ones I can put on the shelf against my movie figures.
Right.
And the animated ones I can put on the shelf and know that they accurately express what's in the show. So, I think it's both, right? For me as a collector, I get exactly where you're coming from, because I'm in the same boat myself. And I'm like, give it all of it to me.
Right. Yeah, and that's where I'm at. Like, if let's say, obviously because you guys are working on the film, that you guys would make collectibles, I would absolutely buy a mini epic or two of it. I mean, that's 100%. I would absolutely do that.
Yeah, the mini epics are the
statues too, because I'm sure there's going to be things in there that when you see them as an animated object, you're thinking, oh, that would look really beautiful, and a 3D-ish real world take to it. So it's definitely something I've thought about since the announcement, because
well, there's so much, there's a lot of crossover possibilities. I don't know if I want to go down the artificial intelligence rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
But obviously, I mean, and it works in both directions. So with some of the figures that Weta has been putting out on the mini epics, I've seen chatter that says, wouldn't it be great if there was an actual show that used these kinds of representations of the characters? Conversely, you've seen pictures of what would the Disney princesses look like if they were in real life.
Yeah, you see stuff like that on Facebook like all the time. Yeah.
And
the mini epics are a great example of an animated style, but they're obviously when you say animated could mean anything. Animated could be photorealistic. Animated could be, Miyazaki films. It could mean, or it can mean Clone Wars, or it can mean the mini epics, which obviously are designed to be something slightly comical because they're a joke, right? The mini epics are a punchline. They're a fun new expression of something. They don't carry the weight that you couldn't do the Lord of the Rings with mini epics. It would be a very different project, but you could do a more slapstick, kind of piss take on it with the mini epics, because that's their whole.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's animated is a wide range, and there's, I think, what in terms of what's appropriate and tasteful for a given property, you got to find the right place in there somewhere. I'm all about the mini epics. I don't want a mini epics feature film of the Lord of the Rings, because it wouldn't be that. It'd be something else, right? But I'd love to see some animated mini epics. I think it'd be fantastic. In fact, I think the team has done some beautiful little advertisements over the years where they've sort of animated them slightly and stuff like that, and they're really, really sweet.
Yeah, I like
Well, now they're using them to do their own individual projects, and you guys are giving them away.
I keep trying to win one of those. Dang
Oh,
it!
those are
Like,
cool.
there's been 2 or 3. I'm like, oh god, I'd really like to win that. And then the next newsletter comes out, I'm like,
Right. Missed it again.
Yeah, the ones have been really great. Yeah, I just want to call out to Jorgelina Yimi and Mauro Santini, the 2 mini epics masterminds, who I think they just do such beautiful work.
well, they're fun pieces. I think they do a good job with coming up with ideas and making them fun. And I think most people take them for what they are, a fun take on characters that, if you're a long time fan, and been reading it since the book since, a long time ago, and or you came into it just 20 years ago like I did with the movies, it's just a fun take on characters. So I think you guys are doing, I love that line. I don't have every one of them, but I have several. But I mean, I always talk about when I do get one and do a review or whatever, to me, they're a great line for people that want to have Lord of the Rings stuff that, want a piece that is affordable for a budget, because I mean, obviously a statue, there's an investment. And I think that's the how you have to look at a statue versus a mini epic. In that instance, a statue, there's an investment. When you're talking 3, 4, 5, pardon me, $100,000 piece, that's an investment. You're having to put money aside. You might have, a few extra bucks aside where you could grab a mini epic. So I think you guys are doing fantastic with that.
I'm thinking of incorporating them into my manger scene for Christmas. So
little mini epics nativity.
exactly.
That's great. You're going to have to do that now, right?
That's right. That's right.
Now you've put it on record where it's recorded for history. You now have to do it.
I'll have to send you.
I have some little droids, little R2D2 repaints and stuff like that Disney's put out over the years with Christmas elements on. They've got Santa hats and all that kind of stuff. One's holding some mistletoe. So I set them up. Most of the time, my Star Wars stuff lives in this, which is our spare room and office and storage area. But at Christmas time and Halloween, I can sometimes sneak some of them upstairs just for a limited time only, right? And my wife's like, I see her giving me the she's like, oh, it's only going to be there for a couple of weeks. It's okay. So I've got a little scene set up with my Christmas droids. And somebody made a friend of mine, Tanya, made this gorgeous little sculpture of my greyhound dressed up in Mandalorian armor. Filled up on her dog bed. It was a Christmas gift a few years ago. So they're on the shelf sitting around my greyhound. But somebody came in one day and looked at them and went, "Oh wow, is that like a little Star Wars nativity scene?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's not what I had in mind." But now I see it. It's sacrilegious, actually.
Was your wife around when that comment was made? Because what was her reaction to? Oh my God, it's a Star Wars.
There were some chuckles, yeah. So anyway, yes, I think I've got 1 week before I have to take them up. Boxing Day, those guys are being boxed up again, right?
Really boxed up again. So on the questions, hit some of these questions. Let's see. Do you have any bucket list characters or realms from Middle Earth that you haven't, or Weta hasn't worked on, that you're looking, to be a part of? Obviously, you're with the focus, as we talked about earlier, with your role adjusting a little bit. Is there a character or area, realm that you haven't gotten a chance to work on that you're like, I'm going to make sure I consult the heck out of that and in on that?
I mean, man, I think we're if ever the rights to the Silmarillion became available,
yeah,
sign me up, man. What do I have to do? Who do I got to kill? I'm there for that. That would be a dream, wouldn't it? I mean, and then where do you even start in there? It's such a smorgasbord, such a chocolate box of amazing opportunities in there.
Right, the Silmarillion, and that's, I think, one of the things for anybody that hasn't read it. I've gone through it once, and that's what made it hard to read through. There's just so
you'd have to break it down.
that
sure.
I'm glad that they're doing the fall of Numenor and pulling some of these chunks out, because to be honest with you, I think it will make the Silmarillion easier to work with, because it's a heavy read. Because you're like, you open it up and you're like reading the Bible, you're like, and I'm like, what is going on? Because I mean, when I read it, I had like,
where's Frodo? Yeah.
well, it's one of those things when you've read the books before and everything, maybe you kind of knew what was coming. But I'm like I said, I came from the movies. I did, I read all the Lord of the Rings before Return of the King came out, so I had done that. And then read The Hobbit, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give this book a go and see how it, and I'm like reading, I'm like, it's like the beginning, like I said, it's like the beginning of the Bible, it's creation. I'm going, did I pick up the wrong book? This is just, and it's just, it took me a minute to get through. So yeah, there's just a great, I mean, that would be a line of collectibles, I think, in and of itself, not just outside of just the normal Middle Earth stuff. But is there anybody from the Silmarillion that you would be like, I want to do that one first? Is there one that means more to you than anybody else?
Character-wise, I'm not sure, but I mean, just the stories that speak to me. I mean, they're all amazing stories in there, and I think there's like in my head canon, well, not head canon, in my imagination, there's a movie for like each major story in there, like. Yeah. And HarperCollins have been putting out these beautiful books, right? But exactly as you said, they condense down certain stories and just give you one book, which compiles all the material for that. The most recent one being Brian Sibley's beautiful Fall of Numenor, gorgeously illustrated by Alan Lee. Oh my God, I'm reading that at the moment. I've read those stories before, but it's just amazing to go through and
it's great to have them, as you say, all concentrated. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, so to me, stories like that, like you said, Fall of Numenor, or the Fall of Gondolin, or this tale of Beren and Luthien, or the Children of Húrin. I mean, they're just, oh man, don't get me started. But just grab one of those and turn it into a feature film would be incredible.
Well, the thing is, I think with the Silmarillion, we talk about like a feature film. I don't know that it would have to be feature films. I think it would be, you'd have to do.
It would break down. My hunch is it would go to Beren and Luthien first, because you got a romance there.
Right. And that's acceptable, right?
More about there. You've got, Huon and Karkartharoth, and, so you've got wonderful epic scenes, but also a love story and changing into a hound and a bat and, all kinds of wonderful things.
Give me some Balrogs. That would be cool. They're Balrogs.
Yeah. So
when you get to the Fall of Gondolin, my gosh, that's
I would definitely, for me, I think it would be, I would have to, obviously, you guys know I like Balrogs, obviously. I would definitely want stuff dealing with Numenor, just because I love, well, I mean, when I have read things about Numenor over the years, Amazon didn't necessarily match that, but what they did was really beautiful. But I love the Gondorian culture and the architecture and the stuff that, because what my mind movie looks like is what you guys designed, obviously, in the films. So I just love the way that it looks and the way that it was described in the books. And so, yeah, I would want, for me, it would be Numenor, because I want just that connection to Gondor, to Elendil, to Aragorn, to what those people, from taking what happened at the fall of Numenor, the bad things, the corruption, to ultimately trying to be good and do the right thing because it was the right thing to do, speaks to me on a personal level and in a way that I try to conduct myself. So I love how they do things. So yeah,
Daniel, when you engage in these kinds of stories, whether it's stuff that hasn't happened yet or things that you've worked on, what captures the mood and the moment for you? Because there's a lot of places you can go. We can look at an object, we can look at a character, we can look at a diorama, we can look at an environment. So for you, what do you like to work on that kind of grabs you that way?
I've never been gifted in the way that people like, Alan Lee and John Howe, Ted Naismith. These guys can conceive these scenes, and when you look at their imagery, you can feel the temperature of the air in it, right? You can feel the moisture in the air. You can smell it. You feel like you're in that space. That's never something I've been very good at ever doing in my own artwork. So my way in, even though I'm imagining that stuff when I'm reading the books, my way in tends to be through a character or an object, just because that's something that my limited head I can actually imagine and sit down and draw, and then build out from there. So I think it's a character or a prop or something like that, or a costume or something of that nature, a creature, and then build out from that point and step out slowly, as opposed to diving in and like, I'm going to create a castle. I don't know how those guys do it, but they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Well, I think too that, well, first off, don't shortchange yourself. I've seen your drawings and your artwork, and it's
Yeah,
very,
but you have, that's nice of you to say, but you haven't seen any environments from me, and there's a reason for that.
okay, all right, I'll okay, all right, I'll let you sidestep it yeah, with that. Okay, so talking about like environments and stuff, and talking to about um one of my, like I said, one of my favorite places in Gondor. Obviously, we're getting ready to go into 2023, which is the 20th anniversary of the end of the greatest trilogy of all time. You can take that to the bank. Anybody that wants to watch this and argue with, I'll die on that hill.
Changed my mind. He says he's got
Yeah,
a sign.
exactly. I'm that guy in that beam with the
And you won't.
Yeah, exactly. No, you might as well. You could. Well, we could talk about other things, but I'll die on that hill. How much Gondor are we going to get, do you think? With one, maybe, obviously you can only hint at a few things. I get that, but and then obviously some of it will be outside of when you're doing other projects. But do you expect a lot of Gondor to happen?
Oh, so we're talking collectibles from Weta Workshop here, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's Gondor coming next year. Yeah, I can't get specific about it because I'm not allowed to. They want to preserve some surprises, but no, there's definitely, because that's an area that traditionally in the past we haven't done a lot of, and I'm not even sure why. I think it's just the order that those films come out, and the order that we look at the collectibles. Often Return of the King gets a little bit shortchanged. So there's definitely when I'm thinking back to a year ago when we were planning stuff to come out in the next couple of years, there was definitely an effort to try and make sure that we address some of those glaring omissions, and get Gondor better represented in there in different ways. So yes, there's definitely Gondor coming in 2023 and beyond. There's so much stuff from the Return of the King, and because the last couple of years have played havoc with our production schedule. So there's a lot of stuff from the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers that has slipped and is bumping this next year. So definitely you can look forward to this. There's still lots of cool stuff from those first two films coming, and there will definitely be more Return of the King. I think there'll be more Return of the King coming for like the next 2 or 3 years, would be my guess. Again, I'm not really as actively involved in that anymore, so I don't have great visibility on that, but my sense of it is, yes, Gondor fans, you have been heard. Gondor calls parade.
There's the on the Flame of Endune and stuff. There's the petition to have Minas Tirith, the open edition reopened, and
great idea.
Is that something that Weta is, because obviously I don't want to, you can't divulge things or you might not know, but is that something that Weta is thinking about maybe doing because of the...
They take that stuff very seriously, and things like petitions are fantastic because what they do is they demonstrate the appetite for stuff. So it's I love it. It's great when people say, hey, we want this, and a bunch of folks all make noise about it. That's the way to get something done. So absolutely, the pleas for Minas Tirith to be re-released have been heard, and because it was an open edition piece, not a limited edition, it means we can do that. It'd be much harder, and I think you get in a shadier territory if you're trying to release something that has already been released as limited edition. The only way to do that is to find a new way of doing it. But
and
yeah,
I think that's always the fine line that comes up, and that talk about on the message board and stuff, is that it's okay to reopen an open edition size with Minas Tirith or whatever, because it's an open edition. It means technically it goes for as long as anybody wants to, or as long as there's a demand for it. But yeah, like some of the limited pieces, you can't, they're numbered. Now that doesn't mean you don't revisit that character, because the classic series Aragorn that I just got is a nice way to get a really beautiful version of Aragorn if you missed out on the Aemon Hand version, which I didn't miss out on. I love Aragorn. He's my favorite, so I made sure to have both. But yeah, that's great because I know there's a lot of people. I mean, I got Minas Tirith when it came out, and I remember talking to Mike Gonzalez, walking to one of the parties that we were going to that while he was there, and talking about like how much it was going to cost and all the stuff that was going into it and everything, and so I made sure I put some money aside and grabbed it and everything. But obviously there's been a lot of people that have gotten into collecting over the last few years, and so have missed it. So yeah, for them that's really cool that if that does happen, it gives them a chance to go back and add that piece, because it is one of the most beautiful pieces, environment, especially if you just take the environments that you guys have ever done. I think it's a really, really beautiful piece. It's one of my absolute favorites.
Thank you. Once again, you got a gorgeous Alan Lee design, and then Dave Tremont Leonard Ellis did I think a bang up job of turning it into a beautiful miniature. So again, that's where you talk about bringing back an open edition piece. It has to be a piece that I think can sustain being released again, right, and hold up next to modern pieces being done. I think that one does. So yes. Yeah, I would hope so. I've got nothing I can confirm with you guys today, but I will say the plea has been heard, and people have been running numbers, and hopefully we'll have good news for you in the anniversary year.
Well, I think anybody, especially anybody from the board or the Lord of the Rings collectors groups like on Facebook and stuff that have been a part of that's good news for them. I would expect that they'll be happy to hear that it's being looked at, and as long as the math works, it sounds like it's definitely got at least a realistic shot of happening. So that's always good. What about prop replicas? Anything prop replica wise that you can tease about that you saw before you left? It seems like that's one of those weird collectibles that there's either several that get announced bang, 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 or we go what seems like just from someone who doesn't collect the prop replicas, because as you can see behind you with Jim's wonderful shield, those things eat up even more real estate than a statue.
You gotta find creative ways to display them.
It's like
they're cool. One of the big challenges with prop replicas, one, there's a few different companies making them, so we got to be careful we don't trip over each other. And that's certainly happened a couple of times where we're like, okay, we're going to do one, and then you go to get it signed off, and you're like, oh, we're doing that already. So United Cutlery is doing it already. Oh, dang it, we did whatever, things like that. The other issue that is, and this is why most of the prop replicas you've seen recently have been smaller ones, but obviously shipping is crazy around the world right now. It's gone through the roof in the last, and that's definitely, we had stuff that was already in development, large things already in development that you've already committed to, but we have to be careful how many large things we do. And prop replicas, for the most part, if we're talking swords, shields, staves, that's a really tough one. They're big, right? So they're expensive to ship around the world at the moment. So that definitely factors into how the choices are made as well.
Right.
But things like the keys have gone really, really well. It was really, really cool, the bag end key. I love that little piece. I don't think it started shipping yet, but it's close. Galadriel's file, which is one we've wanted to do for a long time, and I think the guys knocked it out of the park on that one.
Have you guys thought about, on the lines of prop replicas, obviously years ago you guys did some of the shields and stuff. Those were really cool. And you probably have some. I have a couple. You remember Noble Collection used to do the letter openers, but they were the swords. They were like the metal, really high. Because of props obviously being expensive to ship, have you guys thought about maybe doing some of those to where people who like props or like prop-like items,
smaller ones,
get at least they can add smaller ones to?
Yeah, definitely. It's it's one of those things that comes up all the time, and I'm sure eventually it'll happen. I remember when way back, we're talking 20 years ago now, when we started doing collectibles, we really wanted to do a range of miniature weapons, right. 1/4 scale weapons or 1/6 scale weapons, and the issue we had at the time was because they're going to be, particularly the swords, they're going to be so small, they're going to have to be made out of metal. So then the issue was, they're a stabbing issue, and then there were problems shipping them to certain places around the world. It's like, you can't make a miniature sword, blah blah blah, and so we got told no. And then one of the other companies came up with like, we're making letter openers, and we're like, dang it, Why didn't we think of that? You just change what it's called, and suddenly it's different, right? The rules change. So,
Well, because well, like I said, I have several of those. They come in the really nice collections from Noble Collection, and they don't. There you go, and they're really nice. And I just was obviously, yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm sure the different rules for different countries that probably definitely gets in the way, but like the shields were really. It was one of those things that you talking about prop replicas and stuff for a second, and how in the shipping, that kind of thought just kind of hit me. I'm like, would
the mini,
smaller ones help out? I mean, obviously that doesn't mean don't do prop replicas. For anybody that likes prop replicas and is watching this, I'm not saying don't do those, because those are beautiful, and I want you guys to have cool collectibles too. I'm just more thinking like someone like me, I don't have the room to do big shield, but I sure would love a smaller, like I have the, like the Gondorian shield that you guys did, and the Rohirrim shield that you guys did and stuff. So I would love smaller versions of that. Or if you guys did a Narsil or an Anduril or Sting or whatever. I mean,
yeah,
so
no, I completely agree. It's I'm sure it'll be just a matter of time. It seems like a no-brainer, right?
Right.
Might have to wonder why it hasn't happened already.
It's corollary to some of the helms that you've done, helms and helmets.
Exactly, and the helms have done well. The helms. Gosh, here we are, 20 years later, we're still putting helms out. So.
One other
Yeah.
thing too, like at Comic-Con, it's really hard for anybody that's never been to San Diego, been to Comic-Con. I have purchased statues before at Comic-Con and then tried to lug that around. You can't do it. It is just miserable to do it, and it's not. And it's one of those. It's no shot at any of the people that bring the collectibles to sell, because you got to, that's what one of the things you're there for. But people just don't take care. They'll just run into you and bang you around, and it's bad enough just when I have my camera and it getting banged around. But I was thinking helms, shields, little swords, stuff like that would be great, because you could put that in a backpack and still continue your day. So yeah, absolutely. Pass that along to whoever, because I think that would be something for me, from a collector, like I said, from that does mostly the statues. I would absolutely love that. And it would allow, some prop stuff, maybe that would be really expensive to do in a bigger version. Maybe you could do a smaller version, and it fills gaps for prop collectors too. So that's just.
We did it with Dr. Broadboard's range back in the year as well, right? We had the big full-size ray guns you could get, and then you could get little mini ones as well.
Right.
So something like that would be super cool. I totally agree. Totally agree. I want that in my collection.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I just think that gives it's a neat angle for collectors, both prop collectors and then, like I said, collectors like myself, because like I said, props take up a lot of space, and I think for friends of mine that buy the props too. I've got a friend of mine in Canada that he buys and reviews like the United Cutlery swords, and he buys the stuff from Weta. And I'm just thinking, I don't know how Alfred has any space at all, because he gets the swords, he has the statues, he does the mini epics. I'm like, brother, I don't know how you do it, because
I need another house.
He's gonna, I don't know what property's like in Canada. I don't know how expensive it is, but he may need an add-on here soon, because he does. And so for me, not having any room really at all for big props, even though I would love to have some, smaller versions would be absolutely fantastic. And
they're not, just to be clear, we're not talking that they're taking the place of big full-size prop replicas. It's an and thing, right?
It's absolutely an and thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I mean. I wouldn't want to see prop replicas go away at all, because there are people that is what they collect. And I think that's, for me, I think that's great, because, as a collector, I can look at like Jim's display with that big shield. I can look at that and I can live vicariously through him and having that shield. And it's just absolutely stunning. But and I don't have to spend the money on the big props. I can go, Jim's got one. I'll just look at it in the pictures.
You're welcome to come visit, Josh, anytime.
Someday I'm going to come down to Atlanta. I promise you, I'm going to come down there.
Well, the thing about props is they are generally displayable on a wall as opposed to on a shelf. There's some exceptions, but that makes them a little bit easier. But if you're like me, you've run out of wall space too. So you have to, but there's definitely that 1-to-1, Black Arrow is cool, but the one-to-one Black Arrow is really cool. Or Dwalin's axes are really cool.
Well, one of the things I do like about like with Weta's props and is that they're also safe for people like me, because 100 years ago I did have a few of the United Cutlery swords when my first collection was first getting going, and I had just gotten Sting, and I opened the box out and I was looking at it, and I cut my hand open on the blade. I was like,
wow, really?
it was really sharp. Yeah.
Did you say it was still sharp? Or did you say that? Because you're supposed to say that at that point.
I said some words not safe for YouTube. That's for I'm like, oh, this is really great. It's going back in the box, and I kept it put away for a while, and then I ended up actually selling because it just aesthetically didn't work with what how my display was going at the time. But yeah, I love Weta's because they're amazing looking, they're detailed, and they're safe for stupid people like me who might cut themselves getting their stuff out of the box. So that's also a key thing. Dull props, so people like me don't get it. So one of the things we talked about last time was the Master Collection piece.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much for, again, denting my wallet. You promised a Sam Gamgee, and you gave me a Sam along with some other stuff.
I just made you work really hard for it, though, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about our guesses, and you kind of hinted like we had gotten close, and obviously ended up being pretty close overall.
Really close.
One of the questions that we got, and I think that this is interesting, and I don't know how much you can go into, obviously some of the detail and everything, but what was the decision-making process to do the way that you guys did it, with kind of an very elaborate, stacking of the way that it was done versus maybe say, simpler is not the right word, but kind of more traditional, like Master Collection piece where maybe like you have Frodo looking down, you kind of see the part of the ghost under the water and everything, and kind of keeping it to one level. And what was it a close race going one way or the other? So I mean, how did that work out for you guys? Because it's a beautiful piece, but
the challenge was that the Dead Marshes is a section of the film that doesn't get much love in terms of collectibles, because
that's the first piece that I can think of.
Three guys wandering through a swamp.
Yeah.
But it's a critical thing in the story, right? It's really, really important, and it has really strong emotional beats in there. And in terms of establishing that relationship between Gollum and Frodo and Sam, it's really, really critical. But it's a hard one to turn into a really compelling collectible. I can't remember the moment where it became what it was, but I do remember that there was a desire to do something that had a sort of a symmetry and above and below kind of element to it. And this was one of those environments that kind of just one of these scenes that kind of made sense to do that with, because there's this whole transition between one world and another world, and the idea of lifting it up off the shelf, so it's not just a long, low, flat collectible, it's something that has a little bit of height to it. Very, very appealing. And I've always been excited by collectibles that have kind of a weightless quality to them, that lift. Yeah. So there was a desire at some point to try and replicate that. Say, oh well, what if we stacked those scenes? Well, we took shots of Frodo under the water with these specters, and then we took shots of Sam and Gollum above the water, and we actually, rather than we actually align them, we stack them on top of each other, and we make them rhyme in some kind of interesting way. And we have sort of spiral motion that flows up through it. And so I started doing a little sketch, and I showed it to Richard, and he really responded well to it. He said, yes. And the nice thing about it too was it's different. We haven't done anything quite like that before. And I think that's always important, is to find, newness in what we're doing. So we not just repeating ourselves again and again. So at that point, I think we realized we're onto something that maybe could be kind of cool. And of course, as soon as you add in a sculptor like Brigitte West to actually be the one to make it, then there's no one better suited to the task. And she did an incredible.
If you've been collecting Lord of the Rings stuff for a while, you've seen or have several of the pieces that she's been involved with. And
Brigitte's history on the project goes all the way back to Minas Tirith, to that point. She was there on creating sculptures for the sets, actually, statuary in Minas Tirith that Brigitte worked on. So she has tremendous Middle Earth pedigree.
Nice. Like I said,
It's an astonishing piece. I'm
It's-
looking forward to getting, you know, some of these pieces are astonishing because they capture detail, like this Barad-dûr behind me. But I had no idea how you guys were going to bring the dead marshes to life. And in my head, it was flat, monochromatic. You know, and it's like, okay, it'll have Sam, I guess I'll get it, but I don't know how excited I'm going to be about it. But then when you went vertical and multi-layered, it was just,
thank you.
I had not seen that coming and was.
yeah, that was the part that blew me away, was how you guys made how it stacked, the flow that's in it, the motion that is created just by simply looking at it. Because I mean, people want to go back and rewind the tape when we were talking about it. In my head, it was a flat piece, like I said, maybe, you know, Frodo maybe a little bit extended or something, or, you know, above the base, where kind of like Barad-dûr, where you've got maybe that little bit of a lift, but maybe it's clear and you can kind of see Frodo underneath of it or something. But more of a, you know, traditional flat base with, you know, some light candle, you know, some LEDs maybe working on the lights to make them do stuff. But I mean, it was really, it is a master class of execution, that particular piece, just because of all the stuff that has to go on with it.
If we figure if you're going to call it Masters Collection, it kind of needs to, there has to be some element about it that lifts it beyond just being a cool collectible. There has to be sort of a little different from the other pieces that we make, and so that one, it all came together with that one. I think also the verticality gave us the space in the collectible for some storytelling, and so your eye is led through it, and you can see different things happening in different places. That doesn't necessarily depict just one moment. There's almost a few different things going on there. We've even got, I think some of the images show it, but you've got obviously your animated specters underneath there, the swirling around Frodo, but then also there are little pools that you can see if you look down on the piece from above that have just the serene, tranquil heads of like an elven soldier or a second age, you know, man of Gondor in there as well. There's little things like that too. So we tried to pack as much into it as possible. And the little flames. And the lighting, of course, is the other thing, as you mentioned before, where you can have some lighting effects where the lights fade and change. It adds some life to the piece and sort of gives it a little bit of life, a little bit of animation in a way.
Yeah,
it's really great, and I was definitely happy for people, you know, like Jim, that, you know, they have when they get a character in a piece that they really love, but also it's not just, you know, like that character just doing, you know, something simple. It's
story context, right?
The story context is important. I think, you know, if I think of another one of the Masters series that I've got, which is Gandalf on the cart with Frodo, and it's capturing an iconic moment and a memory for me of, boy, in the movie, that's where I know they're getting this thing right. Okay, so I wanted that. What I think this Dead Marshes does, it goes beyond capturing the moment, but actually embellishes the scene. So in the scene, you kind of fall into the water and you see the specters, but you're seeing it on a screen. And here you're seeing, as you say, this swirling 3D motion, the animation of the lights. You're actually drawn into the scene in ways that you couldn't be in the movie itself. So it's a commentary on and a further exploration.
Right. It's not a piece you just stare. It's not just a piece. And this isn't to knock any other pieces, because I don't have this piece coming, but you know, not to knock any other piece in my collection, but it is one of those pieces I can imagine, and hopefully it'll be at Comic-Con, so I'll get a chance to actually see it in person. But
or you can come visit me when
or I may just come to Atlanta and help Jim set it up. But it looks like the type of piece to me that the way that it's constructed, you can set on like a little stool in front of it and just really kind of look at things. And I imagine you will find something new and different in almost every time that you look at it. And it continues to, it doesn't just tell the story of what's going on, it'll tell multiple stories of different things, whether or not it's a second age Gondorian soldier, or if it's a second age, you know, elven soldier or whatever. I think it's going to tell multiple bits and pieces to people every time you sit and look at it, because you're you're having to look at it and not just go, you're having to kind of,
Right.
oh, I see that. Oh, that's cool. And so,
I mean, to me, a big high-end collectible like that kind of demands some level of that because
right. Yeah. And
you
they
want to
need,
have a deeper experience than just, oh, there it is. You know, you want to be invited in. Again, we're talking Brigitte West again. You know, look at Escape Off the Road. Again, I love that your eye is drawn to little details in that. You can turn it around and there's a rabbit in the back and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh, cool. That was the goal. So
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
one of the series, like we've talked about, and then I just got one from this series this week with the Aragorn with the classic series. And and speaking to the master collections pieces, we've now gotten all 4 Hobbits as part of that particular piece of the Middle Earth statue line. Is the classic series a section where maybe we could see the Hobbits given either maybe, and you address this too on the in your thread on the Flame of Endune, and I've had this conversation with not just you but others at Weta and Sideshow too, when they were doing Lord of the Rings stuff, and that the Hobbits are always kind of slower sellers. But is the classic series a line that we could see the Hobbits maybe apart from, say, Master Collection, obviously high-end pieces versus, say, the classic series, a little maybe more in the wheelhouse for a collector to be able to get a Sam or a Frodo or them together before, do you think that that's a possibility, to see for collectors? Because I would like to add updated versions of those, but I tend to kind of stay away from the master collection stuff just because I get so many other pieces from the other stuff that you guys do.
Yep. I don't see why not. I can't. I don't see why not. Is the short answer. There should be a way, right? So yeah. I mean, as I say, yeah, Hobbits can be challenging in some ways, but I think, and maybe there's lots of different ways you can approach them. I mean, our mini statues of Hobbits.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. The little mini Frodos. These are, I think they're around about 11th scale.
Mm-hmm.
The mini Frodo Sam, they're both done just fine. So I don't see why we shouldn't see a Hobbit expressed in the classic series as well.
Well, just like in obviously that was one of the questions that I got, but it's just in my own head. I'm thinking, because they're open edition, to me, that allows for a little bit more longer. Hey, we know we need to sell 1,000 of these to make this profit or whatever, because for everybody watching, what is a business? They have to make money.
Yeah.
So there has to be there is a number that has to be it's on paper someplace that says, hey, we have to make this many of them to make a profit. They have to cost this much. And the classic series, I think, for characters like the Hobbits, allows for either them to be done in duos or in singular form, but also allow for them to be around for a little bit to be able to hit that number and get what everybody, it gets the character to the fans for the people that want those characters, but it also allows for you guys to be able to do what businesses are wanting to do and make money. That's just, so hopefully, yeah, that would be, to me, that's why I kind of think, if you're going to do a limited piece, you almost have to do like a master collection or a premium piece, because I mean, I love the Hobbits. Don't get me wrong, for people watching this, I love those characters. But in my 20 years of just being a fan, those are always the ones that stick around the longest when they're limited. If you do an open edition piece, I think that they may stick around, but every open edition piece is allowed to stick around for a reason. So it's great. It covers, and realistically, if you guys doing as well as you guys do on every piece that you guys put out, I think it's one of those, you're going to have a beautiful Frodo or a beautiful Sam or a combo piece or whatever. I don't care what the number on the bottom of it is irrelevant. You're not lifting the thing up looking at, oh, I got number 22. It doesn't matter.
We have an example that we can look at, which is Bilbo Baggins and Bag End. You know, we've got the version with so there we did something whereby it was planned as a premium piece, and we knew it would be an expensive piece, but we also knew that there was an appeal in doing a stripped down version of it, where we could double dip to a little degree. And there are differences in the two, but essentially the statue is roughly the same. And you can buy Bilbo sitting at his desk with his half of his study around him, if you want to put that kind of outlay into it, or you can just get Bilbo just at his desk, and that is, you know, correspondingly at a more modest price point, and that's a classic series statue. Now there was some amazing spreadsheet sorcery that was done on that one to get that to actually work within the classic series pricing, because that was that was challenging. But
There's a lot going on with
it as a premium, we were able to do it. So you know, there's things we try from time to time to think outside the box and do something a little bit different in order to try and make it work, because we want to deliver those options to people. We want somebody who loves Bilbo to be able to get a classic series Bilbo. Right. But by the same token, if somebody wants to spend a little bit more and get like the ultimate premium version, we want to do that too. So
yeah, that is a great example, because I've seen pictures of people who, you know, on the board and stuff that you know, or Facebook, that got just the Bilbo at his desk. And I think what people don't realize, if they haven't seen that version, is there is a lot going on with that piece still. That desk is very finely detailed, and that desk in and of itself would, you know, push it to almost be just a regular version statue and not just a classic. So I can imagine, yeah, that you guys had to get creative, because it's not just, I mean, if it was just Bilbo sitting at a chair, that would almost just be a classic series piece, right? You know, just very, very simple. But when you start including things like the desk, which the desk by itself is just a beautiful piece.
Yeah. We really designed that so that it was a complete collectible, and that Bilbo just at his desk still feels like a whole statue on its own. You don't feel like, oh, I'm just getting half a piece from something else. It is its own thing. And then the other version is the upsell from that, the bigger version of it. But essentially, it's still its own thing. Yeah. Having said that, and having used it as an example, it's probably the exception to the norm in terms of the types of pieces that the classics series sort of range is designed for. I think, you know, the classic series range is going forward is probably better thought about in terms of Gandalf or the Black Rider, you know, the Ringwraith, or Galadriel, you know, that sort of thing. I think that's more the direction that will more likely typify that line in the future, those kind of pieces. But where we can do something a little bit different, and we can get the maths to work. And thankfully, we have very, very talented and clever people who do that kind of stuff. That not me. They can make that kind of stuff work, and we can do it. So hopefully, give collectors what they're looking for.
Throwing out an idea of doing it in pairs, because most of the classic pieces are single figures, and those single tend to be so iconic that I want a Galadriel, or I want a Legolas, or I want a Gandalf in my collection. A lot of times the Hobbits come as a group. So a classic scene, we pair out, we do this March Madness thing, and look at scenes and so on that are very popular. And the whole you bow to no one scene as an example. So you have all 4 Hobbits in Minas Tirith. So if I had to envision a classic pose where you're capturing all 4 of those Hobbits with different expressions on their face, but it would be a foursome as opposed to a single. And I don't know if that would work budget-wise, or if the math on that kind of a thing.
Yeah, the challenge for that is, the challenge with multiple figures is anytime you include multiple figures in something, our manufacturers will quote you for 2 characters. So suddenly the price is doubled. So they may be smaller, but there's still just as much work that goes into the faces and the different costume elements and stuff like that. So it becomes much trickier. And you know, again, the state of the world right now, manufacturing cost has gone through the roof. So what it costs us to make these statues now is significantly more than it did 2 years ago, and certainly more than it did 5 years ago. So that means that the economics of it are always changing and challenging, and particularly because we have such long lead times on our pieces. You know, we'll start working on something 18 months to 2 years before you eventually see it on your shelf. And the world changes so much in that amount of time. Sometimes it's left us in a state where we've committed to something, and then suddenly it's not really viable in the same way anymore. We have to really think on our feet to pivot to try and make it work. But that's the nature of being in the collectibles business. That's the nature of any business, really. Yeah, so there are lots of challenges. I would say I think with Hobbits, probably the answer, and again, this is me speculating because I'm not in that loop anymore, but I would say that there are probably lots of different ways that you can approach that and maybe come at it from different sides. And maybe maybe they're all come together in one piece, maybe they're singles, maybe they're in pairs, maybe they're a split release with a single and a premium. I don't know. But
Right.
we know people want their Hobbits. So
And that,
I hope we can deliver.
it's funny because in some ways, because what you just said, like people want their hobbits, and we know that there's demand, but then like the fact that sometimes they are slow sellers, it's kind of like we want it. Well, now they're available. Okay, so we as collectors have to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, because otherwise they keep getting pushed aside, and we get, I love Aragorn. He's my favorite character. I love Gandalf the Great, but we might get another Aragorn. We might get another Gandalf. Well, when they give us a Hobbit, we need to make sure we support the as collectors. Hey, we want these characters. Well, we need to support it, and so that's my slight lecture for my fellow collectors, I guess, out there.
Cool. But you guys, you have though. I want to say this. I appreciate the point you make, but I will say you have Escape Off the Road, 4 Hobbits.
Right.
Bilbo Baggins in his study, Bilbo Baggins at his desk. Yep. Frodo and Gandalf on the cart. Yep. Dead Marshes. You guys have shown up every single time you're asked to for those characters.
And that's true. That is
on behalf of us, thank you for that.
Well, I mean, that's, and as fans, we appreciate obviously, that, but we wouldn't be buying these if these pieces didn't look amazing. And when, again, we've talked about this before, and I've said this, when you look at these pieces, they tell a story, they invoke emotion, and they take you back. And it doesn't necessarily have to be to the book. I mean, to me, seeing the films in the theater was something me and my mom did every time when the first night they came out, we were in the theater. My mom and I were going and seeing them. So, for me, when I see those pieces, and both my parents are, relatively healthy. They're still here, but I know someday when they're not here anymore, I can look at those pieces and I can be taken back to those moments, to those going to the theater with my mom. So for me as a fan, I say thank you to you guys, because it's like a photograph. It's like having a memory. It transport you back. So, you guys keep putting great stuff out. We'll do our best to show up and show up, so to speak, and continue to, as those little gifs and stuff on the internet, throwing the monies and stuff. We'll continue to do that. So well, yeah, exactly. Here you go. Take it.
I just want to hold on that a little bit longer, because as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, the function of a collectible is to for you to bring a moment from the screen into your home and have that live on your shelf. But I love that you took it one step further, which is it's not just that moment from the story, it's that moment in your life as well, which is really, really nice. So that makes it so much more personal. I think that's a lovely, lovely sentiment that hadn't occurred to me before. So thank you for that.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, to me, it's they're not just, and that's why I love them so much, I think, because they're not just collectibles from something that means something. There's collectibles from something I love with people that I love. And so I think that's one of the things that drives us to buying collectibles as collectors, whether or not it's Lord of the Rings or, He-Man, or, for anybody that's watching that actually watched He-Man back in the day, that was my favorite as a kid, whatever. There's those moments. They connect you to the people you have and the people you no longer have. So yeah, absolutely. I think to me, that's how I look at my collectibles. I don't know how other collectors look at them, but that's for me. That's why one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about them, because they're not just beautiful sculptures made by people that I care about. They're beautiful sculptures made by people I care about that allow me to think about other people I care about. So anyways, that's going down a whole emotional road, and I might cry, and I don't really want to do that. So
beautifully said.
Let's see, any other cool stuff to talk about question wise? Okay, so I know here a while back you had said something about with Amon Hen, speaking of like maybe maybe tied to Hobbits. You said there was another Amon Hen piece coming, maybe.
Yep.
Are we going to see that in 2023, you think? Is that one of those pieces that you saw before you kind of adjusted?
Yep. Yeah,
Awesome.
you betcha.
Awesome. How early into 2023 do you think?
I actually just don't know the answer to that.
Sorry, I thought I'd kind of slip that in while I take a sip real quick.
Is this something?
If I knew, I would tell you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is this something other than an environment piece? Is it going to have characters or figures in it, or?
Yeah, no, it's a character. Yep.
Is that in that line of collectibles, not necessarily just Amon Hen, where you guys have thought about doing more pieces that connect to a certain sequence in the film?
Definitely.
Like, hey, here's Aragorn. Well, like the classic series piece, it's beautiful, but it's Aragorn. He's standing on a rock, obviously after the events of, ironically, Amon Hen. But more pieces like, maybe from the Battle of Pelennor Fields, or the stuff in front of the Black Gate. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the place right in front of the Black Gate. I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, somebody's gonna yell at me in the comments.
I know what you're talking about. It's and it's definitely something that when I was plugged in here, that's something I was always looking for opportunities to yes, you release a single character from a scene, but then a year later you release another character from that same scene, because what that means is then when you put that together on your shelf, you've built a moment, and you can keep building it out, and so you can suddenly, again, opportunities for storytelling. You've got then relationships between those characters. So absolutely, we try. I certainly always try to find those opportunities, and I know the team is looking for those going forward as well. That you're like, okay, here's a character from the scene, but here's a couple of other ones as well, but just not all at once, because we don't want to overwhelm people. We try and space them out a wee bit, and that also gives us the chance to see how people react to stuff. Does it land? Do people want more of that or not? So yeah, for sure. So again, on that point, suggestions are always welcome as well, right? Oh, hey, I really love that particular piece, but I'd love this one to go with it. Yeah.
Well, Josh,
those lines. What's that?
It's Moranon is the.
There you go.
See, so you don't get.
Now the people in the comments don't have to yell at me.
That's right.
Someone probably would actually go in there. It's supposed to be. I'm like,
and I probably pronounced it wrong for all I know.
There you go. Now we're gonna get a comment. He pronounced it wrong. You didn't know it, and he mispronounced it. So actually, you kind of, in some ways, hit upon it a little bit there, about the thought process and like putting stuff together. But like with Helm's Deep, that was just announced, which is absolutely beautiful. And for anybody watching, I did actually hit Leonard up, and because
good.
Leonard up. So I a little over the few years, I hit him up on PM and said, hey, can we drag you on sometime? He goes, yeah. He's like, I'm a little busy till after the first of the year. So for anybody that really, he did, with all the work he does in the environments, if that's your angle, we've got somebody who does a lot of that coming on. So, but speaking to with Helm's Deep, because obviously it's got the LEDs, and Sauron's got some stuff. What is the thought process and creation when you guys add that kind of stuff to these collectibles? Obviously you can't speak to certain pieces that that aren't coming, but maybe some of the other pieces that you have worked on. What is the thought process that goes into that? And is this something we want to include? Is it going to increase the cost more than we want it to? How often do we come to getting LEDs in something and don't, and vice versa?
So that's where we're making collectibles now, having done them for 20 years. So particularly when you're revisiting something that maybe somebody already has, and now you're offering it either for new people who are new to the hobby and want a chance at a shot at a character like Sauron, for example, or like Helm's Deep as a place. Trying to think, what can we do differently this time so we're not just repeating ourselves? What can we add to it that elevates it to the next level as well, and makes it worthy of the kind of the pricing that obviously collectibles come with nowadays, simply because of how much it costs to make stuff. And so LEDs has been an interesting thing. It's something. Look, we were talking about LEDs way back in 15 years ago we were looking at trying to incorporate them. And at the time it was a little bit too tricky, but it's become easier as the technology has become more accessible. And the manufacturing processes are really streamlined now. So it's actually not that difficult to add LEDs to a piece. It doesn't add a significant amount to the cost, depending on the complexity of what you're trying to do. In some cases, yes, it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So we certainly look at opportunities, does a piece demand it or does it not, and in some cases, we really feel that it has, and that it just adds a little extra something. Sometimes if you have lights in it that can change and move and shift and hue or intensity, then it adds a little bit of, as we talked about with the Advantages, a bit of animation to it, which is kind of nice, brings it to life on the shelf. It can really enhance the staging of a piece. So we certainly look at it from time to time on pieces and see what pieces kind of demand it, which ones should we do it to or not. An example of one that was designed with LEDs in mind but didn't end up happening was Smaug the Terrible, where he's that was originally intended as a huge Masters Collection piece, even bigger than what it actually is, with light up mouth and eyes and flaming trees and stuff. And then somewhere along the way we realized actually this is kind of getting out of control. And yes, it would be cool. Yes, it would be amazing, but it's that much more difficult and would have actually added significantly to the cost in that instance, because you've got a character that now has a really long, thin neck that you've got to get supports in there to make sure that the neck doesn't snap off. And then you've got to try and run lights in there as well. And then you're running those back down through the body, and then the illuminated flames in the trees. But then how do they look when they're turned off? Do they still look good, or do they look rubbishy? So it's those are one of those situations where in the end, like on that one, we decided, you know what, we feel that we can do a better job with this, or deliver a more consistent product with this if we do it without the lights. And man, I tell you, I was the last holdout on that one, saying no, it's got to have lights. But it's like in the end.
Are you talking about the newest one, the Fire Drake one?
Yeah, we're talking Smaug the Fire Drake. I said Smaug the Terrible. You're right, it's Smaug the Fire Drake. This is the version where he's standing on one of the giant dwarven statues outside of Erebor, and he's launching off. But yeah, that was originally conceived as a fully illuminated piece, and even bigger than it actually is now. But we made it, but it was going to make it, ridiculous, and so we had to sort of pare it back.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad that's interesting, because I mean, obviously you, like Leonard and I here a few years ago when Minas Morgul came out, we actually talked about the LED process, and he pulled the piece out of the case and took the the tower off and showed me like how it was wired on like that. I think it was a pre-production piece maybe, and he was showing me some of that process, and I don't think people sometimes think about that when it comes to like a statue, like the cost, people, oh well, they could have done this, or it would have added to the cost, or like you said with the trees, like one of the knocks sometimes you hear on because you see more versions of it with lights over the last few years, like with the bust that you guys did, the Balrog. Sometimes the way you have to do his mane or his mouth with the clear resin type stuff, it can look kind of weird if you don't do it just right, because trying to put a light in it to make it look neat. So no, I think that's good that when you guys are going through that process, that ultimately like, yeah, we probably need to pump the brakes here. But is there a piece where, to the opposite side of that you guys have put out and then thought after it came out, your pre-production, you're ready to go, you really thought, man, we really should have put lights in that? Is there a piece that you guys
look, I know because that exactly what you described is very familiar to me. I know we've had those moments. I'm struggling now to think of one, but definitely
Sorry, put you on the spot a little bit.
Definitely had beaten a couple for sure. And I think a lot of those were in the early days when we were still experimenting with LEDs and we hadn't quite got our processes down. There were definitely a few back then. A lot of, man, I wish we could have put an LED in that.
Well, some of the Hobbit hole environments would be an example.
Right, yeah.
Just a nice homey interior lighting thing could have seemed simple, but also embellished it. The issue with lighting for me as a collector is thinking about, well, how am I going to display this? In some cases, like this newest master collectible that's coming, I want to display it in a way that will allow it to spin. And
Right.
it's not going to tuck into a shelf somewhere best, but I don't
And
know
that's,
if electronics are going to allow that. So
yeah, that's tough when you've got a cable coming off it, right? Yeah, no, that's a good point. We actually did look at early on. We talked about including some kind of Lazy Susan motorized
yeah,
thing in it, so that it would literally spin. That was one of those things that is, it was starting to, the cost was starting to really blow out. We're like, well, that's one of the first things unfortunately that has to go. We can't do that. There are certain things that you desperately want to hold on to and say, no, this is definitely going to be in the statue no matter what. And there are certain things that would be a nice to have.
yeah.
That was
As
one of
someone
those.
who uses a Lazy Susan for reviews, I love those things. They're very handy.
Definitely.
Trying to think. There was you just said about a minute ago that made me think.
Helm's Deep. You want to talk about Helm's Deep?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Helm's Deep. Yeah.
What an amazing piece.
Thank you. So that is an example of, okay, we're revisiting something that we've already done before, admittedly a long time ago. How can we make it different this time? How can we make it worthy of doing it again? And we approached that because we were looking at each of these three movies that we're hitting anniversaries from at the moment. And the thought was, we want to do at least one really super iconic environment from each of those films and give it the super premium deluxe treatment, which is and obviously Bag End was the obvious one to do for the first for the Fellowship of the Ring, and putting lights in it, I think, again, just adds something that none of our previous versions have had. So we've had versions where we've seen interiors. Well, oh, there we go. There's the classic.
There's the classic.
Yeah, there's the original Hornberg. Wow.
And it's, rock in the back and no fancy lights, and an exploded wall here. And
but one of the challenges with that is it's a beautiful piece, but exactly as we're seeing on screen now, it's very monochromatic, right? It's very gray. So what lighting allowed us to do was to throw a few little wee pinpricks of illumination in there, so that you have some of the light, some of the windows and so on that actually glow with firelight on the inside. And then the thought was, well, if we're putting lights in there anyway, wouldn't it be cool to maybe show the back as kind of a little bit of an Easter egg as well? And so the including some of the passageways and some of the rooms in the back became something that we talked about. That then also made it feel like it was a piece that was worthy of being like the big premium piece to celebrate the Two Towers, as opposed to just an upscaled version of a smaller version of Helm's Deep. But then of course it was like, well, okay, well, how many lights can we squeeze in there, and for production, how's it going to work, and that sort of thing. And obviously there's a limit to that. So
Right.
That's how we ended up with the piece. Now I appreciate some folks have said, well, hang on, it's hard to see the back, but I guess our way of approaching it was the front is the collectible, like that's really it, and the back is kind of more of an Easter egg. I think it's the way we were kind of looking at it. It's like something has to go back there. Let's put something meaningful and cool back there, as opposed to just nothing. But I appreciate it if you're a collector who's like, well, I love the back. I want to see it from that point of view. I don't know what to tell you. In that instance, I think it might just be a case of rotating it on your shelf every once in a while, so you can see both sides of it, perhaps.
Has doing Helm's Deep this way, and now being able to add lights and stuff, has it made it more likely that we might see, and Bag End too for that matter, an updated version of Moria, like maybe some kind of updated version of it? Because I love that piece. I think we might even touched upon it the last time we chatted, but really you have to you can kind of look down the hallway a little bit, and
a flashlight to see
We're talking about the classic. We're talking about the classic Moria from way back in the early days of make-believe. Yeah, it's a tough one. It doesn't have really good angles to look at it. It's all in there, but you've really got to study it. You're right. No, I think that's a great idea. I totally agree. I think that's another environment that is ripe for reimagining, for reapproaching with this kind of thing.
Because I think it kind of in some ways suffers in some ways from the same problems that the original Helm's Deep does. It's all one color.
Yeah.
And so I think it suffers in that instance from the same, but it's really hard to see. I love it, but
well, herein lies the challenge. It's a cave, right? What defines a cave? A cave is an empty space in the middle with rock all the way around it.
Right.
How do you make a collectible of a cave without removing some of the elements that define it as a cave. Okay, let's take the top off so we can see it. Okay, let's take the sides off. Well, it's not a cave anymore now. So
Right.
you've removed almost every side of it. So it is always difficult. Look at that. Yeah, that's great. Mary McLaughlin did a stunning job of it, but it's definitely a piece that is less of a, you put it on your shelf and it has impact. It's more of a, you pick it up and really study it.
This is a flashlight piece.
And it's
Yes.
and it's to this day still one of my favorites. It's still one of my favorites. I mean, I just love that sequence in the film. That was, as I've said before, for me, that was probably the sequence where in the films I was just like, okay, I want to see where this goes. That was
my goodness, and Howard Shore's soundtrack, right? Oh, those dwarven voices.
You know, he's like, "Let there be light," and it's just that you see the Great Hall, and it's just like, this has been fantastic after this, but I am in. So I'm very attached to that environment for that's kind of where I really decided to put all my chips in, as they say. And so, yeah, I would absolutely love it. With that Minas it's just a chance to, if you guys ever redid that in a way, how we're doing, how the environments are being done now, and the love and the treatment that they're being given now, where they're grandiose in scale. I would love to have an updated, even if it was obviously much different, in order to really kind of show their path and everything. It's to me that would be okay. Like, almost like if you cut, the current Moria in half, and you really kind of got to see their path, and
that's a great idea.
There's a Balin's tomb over here, and you get to see.
It's a cool idea. Will you excuse me for 1 second? I will be right back.
No, you're fine. So, for anybody watching while we're doing this, it's we've got like I said, we've got Leonard, we've got him scheduled for people watching. Like I said last time, I've talked to Jerry Vanderstelt. He wants to come on and chat. One of the people that we haven't had any women on the show with us. I've talked to a friend of Torn. Lauren does cosplay. Did you meet Lauren when you were out at New York Comic Con?
It's possible. I don't know.
And she's really cool. I've bugged her about coming on, and
well, even as Daniel's mentioned, there are a lot of great women artists.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely need to possibly see about bugging and seeing if any of them would want to come on. Also, he has a massive YouTube channel for those watching, in Nerd of the Rings, but he also collects and does reviews. And ironically, he does reviews of all like the United Cutlery stuff. So I may bug him about maybe coming on, and
that'd be cool. Yeah, he and I have connected.
Yeah, he's really cool.
Yes.
So that's kind of for people watching, because there's some potential guests to come on and stuff. And I think that's one of the things, Daniel, what we were talking about, some people bring on and that have chats with, and that's one of the things I'm trying to do with this channel a little bit too, and I think Jim wants to do it too as well, is that bring people on like yourself who are doing different things and have that have impacts on it, besides not just regular collectors, because we've obviously had Ben on and stuff, and we want to have more regular collectors on too, but it's kind of fun to bring on people who are aren't just collectors. So kind of like to do that from time to time. So we were talking, we were kind of chatting about some people that we might be dragging on to put up with us for a short period of time.
Well, I'm delighted that you're going to get Leonard on here. That's fantastic. He'll be wonderful.
Yeah.
Just like me, Leonard's a collector as well as a maker. So he's motivated by his love of the stuff that he makes.
Yeah, and for anybody that has not had the chance to meet Leonard, he's just like anybody else from Weta Workshop. He's super sweet, very nice. And I'll remind him of this when we chat, because it's funny. But he 1 year at Comic Con, I don't know, it was maybe a day or two into it. It wasn't when he was at, but me and Dad are walking out of our hotel room, getting ready to get on the elevator, and I get a Facebook message, and he's like, "Hey, you took a couple of pictures of this piece. Do you care if I use it for, my own?" I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, why not?" That's always and I'll say this to not just to you, because I do mean this. It's for people watching. Daniel's always been very kind to me. He's always put up with all my questions. He's always been very, very kind. He's in everything. So I love him to death because of that, if nothing else, because he puts up with me. But Leonard's the same way. I mean, the folks at Weta are just like that. They really do take their time to get to know you and care about what you have to say. And he's like, "Do you care?" and stuff. And I'm like, "Dude, you work at Weta Workshop. You want to use one of my pictures. I'm just a guy from Missouri. You want to use one of my pictures for something to add to show." I'm like, "You grab whatever you want, sir, and you can use it however you like." So
it's always nice to frame it that way, but I'll reframe it to back to you, because I think it's not a case of putting up with. Like, we're passionate about the stuff, and you're passionate about the stuff. So we're just the same kind of people,
Right.
nerding out about something that we both love, right? So we could do it all day.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what, like at Comic-Con, you guys, I mean, it's like I sometimes I laugh because to myself thinking, they have to go, doesn't he know, like there's a lot of other booths he could go look at. But I just enjoy looking at the stuff and having these conversations, and that's one of the things with the channel that I want, is that I want people to feel like they can stop in, they can hear us talking, they can watch the reviews and stuff, and know that despite what the world may be, they can pop on here, they can hear us talking, and know there's people out there like them that just want to sit there and talk about this for a minute and escape. So that's one of the reasons why I love hanging out at the booth so much, is because there's always somebody from there that wants to talk, wants to hear what I have to say, wants to go look at a piece and have a conversation about it, because they love it as much as I love it. And it's always nice when you find people that are like that. So
we make such great friends too, right? Like these, I'm so thankful for the friends I've made through this community, right? Which is what it is. We're all collectors, we're all buying stuff to put on our shelves, but we're also a community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You guys talked earlier about how, this is a business and you have to make money on it, but that, we're not, this is more than just a commercial transaction.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys, Daniel, you mentioned, and there's a great Lord of the Rings quote where right as the company is receiving their elven cloaks, and Pippin asks one of the elven people, "Are these magic cloaks?" And he ultimately says, "No, they're made of all of this stuff." And the clincher was, "For we put the thought of all that we love into all that we make."
That's gorgeous.
And that's the essence of it. It's why when we, as a collector, get the kind of piece that captures not just the scene, but the love engaged in that. And it could be a memory, like Josh said, or for me, I've actually co-opted eventually my wife into this collectible fervor.
Well done.
Yeah, and so that's why anything Sam, or heaven forbid, if you guys ever made anything with Sam and Rosie in it, it's like we want like the first design piece, and cost is no object kind of a thing. So,
Jim's gonna just be sitting there at the computer just waiting to
that's
click.
it.
But yeah, I think that's perfect. I think that little piece that you just read, like you said, plays into what I was talking about earlier, and that they're not just collectibles. And I think I want people to, and while I try, again, I'm an emotional individual, so I tend to kind of get emotional about things in general, things that I care about. But I think that's one thing I want people that come across this on YouTube or whatever, or my fellow collectors. And sometimes I get grumpy maybe on a message board when people are, when conversations are going a certain way. I'm very passionate about it. I'm very blessed. I tell people I have friends all over the world, and I mean that. It's not like, oh, I want to sound great. I truly mean that. I think of Daniel Falconer as a friend. If we lived next door and he needed something from me, I would be there in a heartbeat to help him out. So I've been very blessed, and I know Jim probably feels the same way with the people that he's met. You make these friends, and they're not just people, I only get to see you guys every year at for a few days at Comic-Con. It's really expensive for me to fly to New Zealand from Missouri on a teacher salary. But for that week, I get to see people I care about, and we get to exchange ideas, and they allow me to build out my collection, tie it to memories that I will take with me until my days are done. So yeah, I think that's one thing, like I said, I just want people that watch this to understand that they're not just collectibles. They're more than that. There's magic in them, and not just from what you guys do, but what we as collectors attach to them through our own personal experiences. So yeah, I mean, I have friends that work at Weta Workshop. I love going to the movies and seeing, Weta Workshop, where I know people that work there. It's kind of to know to. So I always try to, even if it's a movie, I'm not necessarily interested in. If I know Weta has been involved in it, I do try to go see it. If nothing else, just to show support for people that I know that might have worked on it. It's you support the people that have supported you, and so that's just always kind of my thought process. Completely non-collectibles related, obviously.
It's not taken for granted. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And I think that passion informs everything about how we engage with our collectibles, right? Including making sure that we get something, the contract is fulfilled, that you get something you're happy with as well. So we're always trying to do better, and sometimes we stumble, but we're always trying. Know that the aim is always to try and do the very, very best for you guys that we possibly can. Right. And hopefully where we stumble, we can try and fix those processes or address those issues and get better and better and better. But as we say before, there are business transactions happening, and inevitably in business transactions sometimes it's contentious. But the intent is always to try and give you something that gives you joy. So we'll always try.
I think too, people that don't, I think sometimes forget too, with companies, is that they're run by people with emotions and feelings, and sometimes hey, they stub their toe. They're not looking to put out a bad product. I mean, if I go to Taco Bell, which is always a mistake, probably, really, considering, but it's and so you go to Taco Bell, you're not looking to get, you're hoping your food comes out, but sometimes it comes out messed up, and it happens. They're not making your food, wrong on purpose, and that's not to excuse that, hey, to say, oh, well, it's okay for people to make mistakes. It just happens. And obviously statues cost quite a bit more than a taco at Taco Bell. But I think sometimes the assumption that you see on the internet is that it's almost not that it's being done on purpose, but there's it's a mistake. And they're not doing it. They're not doing it to take your money or anything. Not just Weta, but any collectibles company or anything out there. I'm speaking in generalities here more than anything. But there's people behind there. So that's always my line of thing. Is just try to be kind about it.
As you said earlier, Daniel, there are things going on, logistics costs, raw materials costs, etc., that are having a fundamental effect on the economic equation. What I appreciate, some of the background stories you're telling are how you all are trying to use creativity and good design engineering to look for ways to keep things affordable. And yet the economic reality these days is that things have gotten much more expensive, not only to make, but to ship. And so that's just the reality. And we collectors are going to, I guess, have to adjust our appetites a bit.
Well, yeah, and just no, I appreciate you saying that. It's thanks for the thoughtfulness. By the same token, we also adjust as we go to try and we just want to just pass the burden on to you guys all the time. It's a two-way relationship here. So we're adjusting. The issue for us, of course, is that we've got stuff that's in development that was started when things were different, and so sometimes it takes a while for processes to improve, but the intent is definitely there. So appreciate that.
Let's see. Looking at some of these questions. Talked to somebody asked about the Hobbiton factory that is there ever was is there a thought about, apparently they're asking about making it bigger than the original, seems ideal. Is it another one of those kinds of pieces that you guys might revisit or might do as a bigger form now that you guys are kind of you doing extra large versions versus, to use another food analogy, a large versus an extra large, is it
Not everything has to be extra large. I mean, again, this is
the
just me
waistline
talking
definitely says not everything should be extra large.
So for those maybe who don't know what we're talking about here, this is a piece that was going to be released way back, like nearly 20 years ago. It was a little miniature version of the factory in Hobbiton from Frodo's vision of the Scoured Shire.
Oh.
Didn't happen at the time because the tiny wee little elements on it were going to be really, really problematic to manufacture. That's not as big a deal now. We could do that now. So the question is that going to happen? Is the Hobbiton factory going to happen? And if it does happen, would it be exactly as it was? A little, I think it was about this sort of size,
Yeah, I remember it being very little. The pictures
or does it justify a bigger release and therefore a bigger price point as well? I think that's something that would have to be judged when that product comes up as a suggestion. For our folks who make those decisions. We'd have to evaluate that at the time. So I wouldn't want to preempt whatever decision that was.
Right.
However, that piece, the manufacturing challenges around that piece 20 years ago are no longer a concern to us now. So there's, in theory, no reason why that piece couldn't happen. It will all come down to
demand and stuff for it, essentially.
Is there enough demand for that piece to happen, and at what price point and what size? And so, there's a sweet spot in there somewhere for the folks to find.
I would say to collectors then watching this, sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to step on your toes there. Is that if this is a piece that collectors or that you all that are watching or on message boards or Facebook groups, you need to let Weta know that it's something that you're interested in. I mean, if it's obviously the challenges to make it sound like have gone away, and I would agree, just based on just the pieces that I have now versus the pieces that that I have from that are part of the original line, and the things that are being done now. I'm like, I would have never have thought about 20 years ago. Yeah, I think collectors need to make their voices heard. Again, going you need obviously need to show up and let them know that you're interested. And as someone who is into environments, it's one I could be tempted to get because I really like environments. I like it's obviously one. I know Middle Earth is a fictional world. People watching this, but it's not real. I'm not going to get to visit those places. Drats, and it is expensive to get to New Zealand, but the environments are beautiful and wonderful, and I love them very much because I can go to New Zealand and I can go to Middle Earth all by just visiting, by having those pieces. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would encourage people to do that. Let's see what else. Oh,
it's amazing to me that we still have environments and characters from these movies that are 20 years old now that we still haven't managed to release. It's like, it's such a rich world that there's still stuff being done for the first time. I mean, yes, we go back and we're revisiting Helm's Deep and Bag End, which I think, to my mind, is justified. But there's also all this other new stuff that we can do, and we will be doing. We are. I look at what's coming out next year, and there are certainly revisits of stuff that need a revisit or demand a revisit or a new expression of something that's been done before. But there's also a ton of stuff in there that is brand new, never been done before. So hopefully we make people happy.
Denethor, maybe? Just a Denethor?
Keep making the noise.
That is definitely one piece. Me and like Philden and stuff on the man. We've
oh, you guys.
And it's crazy, and it really is actually crazy. That 20 years later, there are pieces and characters and places and all that kind of stuff that haven't been made because of the sheer number of pieces that have that not just excluding this stuff that's been done by companies outside of Sideshow and Weta, because obviously you guys were partnered up with the original line, but all the stuff that you guys did in that time period with the original, line, all the stuff that you all have done individually speaking since you guys got, the license back to work on the 6 scale stuff and everything. It is crazy that there are places like the Hobbiton Factory, Denethor, up to, and it's one of the things I'm going to bug you back here in a second. Like Aeromir, up to a few years ago, had nothing but just like the bust. Isildur, Elendil, Gilgalad. I mean, some of these characters, even though, I mean, granted, I know, like, they only had seconds of screen time with like some of the prologue stuff, but that they hadn't really, other than like a bust or even in Denethor's instance, not at all, have not been made. So that is kind of in some ways, a thing to think about, that 20 years, some of these places haven't been touched, which shows you just how big the world that Tolkien created and that Peter Jackson put on screen really.
It speaks to the richness of that world, right? And I think sometimes it takes anniversaries to create the right opportunity for a particular product, for lack of a better word, to happen. Because it's like, oh, well, this year we should do this character because they're featured in this thing. Because otherwise, if it's just any other year, there's always something else that gets in the way. There's always something else that gets in front, particularly for characters like Denethor. Because, let's all be honest.
Yeah.
Denethor's cool, but he ain't lighting the world on fire with sales. There is a market for Denethor, absolutely.
Is that pun intentional about lighting the world on fire?
I'm not that clever. I wish I had done that.
I see. Now I'm not gonna lie. I'm like Jim. I'm tight. He's making a pun here. No. You should have just said yes. I meant to do that because.
Yeah. And that collectible, okay, and then we're really going to push this metaphor there. That collectible would have a long way to run before it finally, makes the plunge and becomes a profitable. I don't know. I'm being silly now, but no, the point is made though. There's always other stuff that gets in the way, but then anniversary years come along and they kind of force something to happen. So the revisit of Helm's Deep is something we've wanted to do for a long time, but it took an anniversary year to really kind of demand, no, we've got to go back to Helm's Deep in 2022.
No, I agree. I think that's fantastic, because I mean I've had the same thought process on with something like a Denethor, that the Return of the King anniversary time period is a great time to do. You can get away with doing a character like Denethor, who probably in some ways might be a slow seller, a la how maybe like as we discussed with some of the Hobbits and stuff. You can get away with doing him during an anniversary year because there's going to be an increased, oh, you know what, they might never do him again. I loved Return of the King. Yeah, let's get him for the collection to represent, part of, our Gondorian collection and stuff, because, obviously being a part of that history and stuff. So yeah, I'm glad you guys went back and did Helm's Deep. Like I said, I have the original, like Jim does. I love it, but this one, it's so fantastic looking with the lights and the detailing that can be done now 20 years later.
So I have to ask then, is it going to be another 10 years before we ever get back to Dol Guldur and those little miniatures?
Oh man, I know. So did we talk about this last time? Did we talk about?
We might have mentioned it, but
I think we tiptoed a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, we would love. Look, there's actually a lot of love for the 30th scale. Even both I know out there amongst collectors, and then also within the workshop, we had great plans for that, and we would love to circle back to, and it almost happened. We were so close, and then freaking COVID hit, and that changed everything, and it made it much more difficult. Yeah, I hope the door is not closed on that completely. We really would love to come back to it. There's got to be something like that we can do in the future. So please, I would just say be patient with us. Watch this space. It is, and to some degree, it does become a bandwidth issue. We're actually quite a small team in our collectibles division, and so at some point there's stuff that we really want to do. And to be honest, the only reason we haven't done it is because there's always something else to do.
Right.
Sure.
But things like the 1/30th scale, we know there's an appetite for us to circle back to that and try and fulfill the promise of what that could be. So I hope we can.
Another piece that, two things.
Look, please, keep talking about it, keep asking us, because that keeps the pressure on, right?
Right.
So please.
Well, and another thing too to think about when it comes to that is obviously, like the helm line, and I think we might have even talked about this last time a little bit, in that, the helm line obviously started out as metal and had to shift to something else in order to make it more affordable to do now. And I think collectors have to be, if they want that line to continue, they may have to allow for it. While the first few figures were metal, and they're heavy, by the way, for people that have not had those. I've got some of the figures. Those figures, you could hurt somebody with those things. You throw it at somebody. I mean, they're a weighty thing. I mean, they're a great paperweight. Is do them, they maybe have to be done like the helms are done, and kind of that, I don't know, polyurethane or whatever material that they're being done in now, where it's lighter, and understand there could be some textural differences or something, but if collectors can stay open-minded, because sometimes I think we as collectors get a little closed-minded. Oh, it has to be like it was here.
Of course. Yep.
I think if collectors that want that line to continue, stay open-minded about the fact that, hey, if they do them kind of like they did the helmets, I think that opens the door wider, not necessarily open, but opens the gap a little bit, at least a little bit more, to the possibility that down the road, maybe some more 30th scale stuff could happen if they're willing to allow for a change in material. Because, I mean, as we've talked several times in this episode, making stuff is really expensive anymore. And that's what people don't want to take as politics, but people don't think about from a manufacturing and shipping. It's like getting these materials and making them and paying people to do them, whether or not it's in China or wherever. And then you got the shipping companies that are, have raised their rates a bunch. Doing those figures in metal, to me, in 2022 just doesn't make sense. From a guy who's just got a few and stuff, I'm like, you can't do those in metal. They were like $50, $60, $70, whatever. And when they came out, those little metal figures now would be probably $150, $200 for just little metal figures. They're going to be done in a different material. And as we've seen with the helmets, they can look freaking cool done in a different material.
I'm glad you brought up the helmets, because the nice thing with there was, obviously we wanted to keep making them in metal, and it just wasn't feasible, unfortunately. But the resin that we use now for the helmets actually captures a finer level of detail than we were able to get in the metal. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. They don't have that weight to them, but they're crisper in the detailing. But did you see? Then this comes back to us constantly checking again and rechecking to see whether the things whether we can still do stuff, and whether no is still the answer on some things. And in some cases, the answer is actually yes. So, for example, the crown of King Theoden that we're coming out with in the helm line is metal.
Oh, really?
Metal. Yeah. So we have been able to do it in a couple of cases. This is the first of them, and hopefully there'll be more in the future. But because it uses much less product, because it's a crown rather than a full helm, we've been able to do that one in metal. So the door is not completely closed.
I need to get an order for, because it looks cool, and I like the design of it. So.
Oh, thank you. It's a cool piece. Again, and Sean Bolton, who was sculpting, probably sculpted half, I think, or close to half of the helms that we did way back 20 years ago when we very first started them, came back and is working on this one now as well. So it's really nice to have him back with doing what he does best, which is this amazing, fine, intricate detail, all by hand, I might add too. So yeah.
That's the thing with like the crowns, especially the crowns, is how tiny they are, and like the detailing that has to be done. So I mean, I can't draw stick figures, as I've said before. So I can't imagine having the skill set to be able to just finally do, especially by hand.
He's amazing. Sean is incredible. Sean started at Weta Workshop about the same time I did, which is 26 years ago now. And so I was always in awe. He has such a meticulous attention, and he can do stuff that looks like it's been nowadays 3D printed or meticulously tooled out by a machine, and he's just done it by hand, with perfectly straight lines, and just it's incredible. He's an extraordinary sculptor, and he's a bit like Alan Lee. He just sits there and quietly does this little hand motion. Next thing you know, there's this incredible piece of art. It's extraordinary. So yeah, it's really great having him back on the team, because Sean went away and did other stuff for a few years, and now he's back at Weta Workshop making cool collectibles for us again.
Nice.
But yeah, and of course, so that's the other thing too, is being cast in metal, things have to be a little thicker as well. So the nice thing about the resin mini helms that we did was they could be a little bit thinner in places, whereas now there's a sort of a minimum thickness when you're making the metal we can do with them. So they're a little chunkier, but that's okay. Again, we try and pick the right material where we can for the right product, for price and for aesthetics and durability, all that kind of stuff. It's what I've learned in my time at Weta Workshop on collectibles, as there are so many different ways to approach something to try and find the best fit for it. And I think being married to just one way of doing things is where you get into trouble. And so we try and constantly reassess things from different angles to see if maybe it's a better way we can be doing it.
Well, I think your guys' stuff, if you've been collecting like Jim and I have been for 20 years, I think you've seen that you guys aren't afraid to try different things. I mean, go back and look at some of the original stuff from the Sideshow Weta line, and they're beautiful pieces, and I love every single one that I have in my collection. But looking at them now to what you guys are willing to try, just something we talked about tonight with the Magic Collection piece. I mean, they're different. They're not necessarily better, but it's different, and different is okay, because if we don't, we're not getting pieces like Treebeard. We're not getting Sauron. We're not getting Dead Marshes. We're not getting Bilbo and Bag End. We're not. I mean, all these different pieces that are taking different things. Yeah. So I agree. I think it's a situation where you guys aren't afraid to push the envelope and see what's out there and try things. And the Smaug piece that you were talking about earlier, you guys talked about doing LEDs, and you realize that's pushing the envelope too far for, at least for that particular piece. It takes it past what makes sense, not just money wise, but probably overall aesthetic on a collectible. So yeah, I think anybody that looks at their collection, I think they can very much see that you guys are willing to kind of push, but you also are smart enough to say, yeah, this is the line, we can't cross it here, but we can go back and we can push the envelope a little bit on a crown, and we can go back to doing it metal, and we know that we can push it there. So yeah, I think that's absolutely evident in our collectibles and stuff that we have in our collections.
Cool.
So another piece that we talked, well, kind of in the same vein of conversation we had a little bit earlier about like doing things differently. Somebody asked about Eomer, and it's one of my absolute favorite pieces in my collection. Obviously, we have him coming down the hill to help, at the end of the Battle of Helm's Deep. Was it ever thought about maybe doing that piece? They asked one way, but I'll add a part to it. One, maybe doing it flat, but at that, or maybe doing him at the Battle of Pelennor Fields and doing it that way. How close did it come to where he's picking the spear? How close did he come to being a totally different piece, or was that really kind of where you guys honed in on Helm's Deep, coming charging down the hill with Gandalf the White? I mean, as far as like how close was he to something else, I guess.
I'm trying to cast my mind back to that time, and my memory's a little foggy on this. I know we talked about it. I think again it was from memory, it was driven by the desire to try and do something a little bit different, because we'd done a lot of characters on horseback before, galloping along or rearing or whatever, and having him charging down the scree slope meant that we had the piece on an angle that we'd never done before, and that was interesting. It took it up off the horizontal, and so from memory that was why that argument got won, and it became that versus the other. And obviously it's up to folks to judge whether they prefer that, whichever choice they would have preferred. But my memory is it was the desire to try and find something new, something a bit different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last question before we let you go, because I didn't realize we've been doing this for 2 hours, so I'm seeing a bunch of Jim's evening. the collector's guide that you guys did 100 years ago. Are we gonna get a volume 2 of that? Do you think? I mean, because you've done a lot with the books, you know, and stuff too that people don't know about that, you know, with that Weta has put out. Are we gonna maybe ever get a chance to have a volume 2 with stuff that's happened since then, and you know, collectors' input and stuff like that was in the first one?
I would love to, and it gets talked about all the time. There have been different reasons why it hasn't happened yet, and again, those factors that weigh in on that change all the time. So sooner or later, the factors are going to weigh in on the side of yes being the answer that wins that argument. I keep pushing for it because it's something I think would be really, really cool to do. And there are a lot of voices of Weta, including Richard Taylor, who really want it to happen. So I would hope so, yes.
Yeah, that first book is absolutely fantastic, and I think it's one of those things that collectors really would like to have an updated version, because so much has happened since that book came out.
Yeah, right.
I mean, was much of the Hobbit stuff in there at all? I don't think so.
None of it, because I think it came out, from memory, it came out in 2010 or 2011. I don't think we had any Hobbit stuff in it yet.
Yeah, so the Hobbit stuff, I mean, all the Master Collection pieces, all the premium statues, all the other stuff, that, you know, the Labyrinth stuff, all the mini epics. I mean, just actually, there probably needs to be a volume 2 and a volume 3, to be truthfully honest.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. I'm trying to think.
I'm sort of seeing all those. I'm going, you can't put all of that in just one book.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the longer we leave it, the harder it becomes to do, right? So yeah.
And it's one of those things I think collectors like to have too, not just, you know, not just obviously statues, but again, it's neat to go back and see, like, when was this produced? What was the edition size? You know, all those things that are kind of in those kinds of books. So yeah, absolutely. So that was the last question that I had. You know, as always, you know, thank you for your time. It's always great to be able to sit down and chat with you and catch up and stuff. And as I said in the beginning, you know, just because obviously, you know, you're adjusting all your duties at Weta, I'm not done pestering you. You're still gonna have to put up with me.
Good.
And we're still gonna drag you on, even if it's nothing else, like you just coming on and you're just kind of, hey, this would be kind of neat to see, you know, as we're talking as we as just, you know, fans speculate and stuff going into Comic-Con or whatever. So yeah, absolutely, we're still gonna drag you on and have conversations. So, and anytime you want to come on and chat about Middle Earth and any of the things that go into collectibles wise, or just Middle Earth in general, just hit me up and we'll figure something out, and I'll make Jim sit down for a little while and put up with me too. And so that way we have a good time talking about this stuff. So thank you again for coming on and giving us of your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's always such a joy. Thanks for being so into it, guys. And yeah, and you're sharing your perspectives. I really appreciate it. You will have fantastic holidays, both of you.
And
Yeah.
you too.
Yeah, you as well. Jim, you got any final thoughts?
Well, maybe there will be collectibles in our future soon.
Absolutely.
One can hope.
That.
Well,
Awesome.
just final thoughts out the door from me. You know, again, thank you to these two gentlemen for being a part of this. Thank you guys that take the time to watch the podcasts and the reviews when I get a chance to do those, for supporting the OneRing.net over the last 20 plus years, supporting the awesome folks at Weta Workshop and all the cool stuff that they do. Till next time, guys, later.